Thank you for tuning into the S.H.A.R.E podcast, where we talk about sex, relationships, and culture. We want to start off this episode with a trigger warning. This episode is heavy as we talk about sex trafficking during this Sex Trafficking Awareness Month. This episode will touch on topics some people might find disturbing or uncomfortable. So please do make sure that if you need to take a break, if you need to pause the podcast, come back and listen to it, that's okay. And there will be links in the description that if you are going through a situation that's similar, where you can find some help. Welcome to the S.H.A.R.E podcast, where we talk about sex, relationships, and culture. We are your hosts, Carl and
Kassia.
And we're back.
We are back.
For another time.
Another one.
Yeah. Today's podcast is actually, it's a bit heavy. So there was a trigger warning at the beginning of the podcast. February is Sex Trafficking Awareness Month. And we think it's incredibly important to elevate this conversation. And so we're going to be talking about that today, specifically how it affects us here locally, right in Hamilton.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we are not, the go-to people to talk about this. So, however, we have an amazing guest joining us today, Michelle Furgiuele from Restoration Second Stage Homes, who's going to be sharing with us a bit of her story, a bit of what she does. So without anything further to say, Michelle, welcome to the S.H.A.R.E podcast.
Yay! Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
We are excited to have you. So one of the things that we do with all of our guests is we ask them to share a little bit about themselves. So we're going to ask you a couple of questions. Where do you work? What's a quirk of yours, a passion, and
your education.
Your education. Yeah. Why did you decide to get into what you're doing right now?
Okay. Awesome. Sounds good. So a little bit more about myself. I currently work at Restoration Second Stage Homes. I am the peer advocate and outreach facilitator there. If you want to know about one of my passion is preventative measures for human sex trafficking. And that goes right into my education. I actually have very limited education. I have not even graduated high school. I myself am a survivor of domestic human sex trafficking. And the beauty of having an organization like Restoration Second Stage Homes is we are a transitional safe house, which we'll get into, but we also have a peer support program that's developed and run by survivors of human trafficking and sexual exploitation. So I'm very blessed to have the opportunity to work for Restorations and have the spotlight to share some knowledge just based off my own lived experience. Moving forward. And through Restorations, I'd say one of my quirks is we've just been doing some personality testing. So super into Enneagrams right now. And I am an Enneagram 8. So if you know me, like that is so spot on. So that's my newest quirk. And I'm living my life by being an Enneagram 8.
Love it. Love it. Anytime you say assessment, everyone in the office at Atwell is like, oh my gosh, what is an assessment? That's so exciting. We need to put that into our own staff training. And like,
Carl loves them.
Honestly,
they're the best.
I was so anti doing this personality test until we did it. And I was like, this is life altering. I love it.
I'm glad that there are some people out there who love taking these assessments. I'm like, yes, yeah, check.
I just never know what to say.
You never know what to say?
Yeah.
Kassia.
I overthink it.
That's fair. I feel like I underthink it. I'm just like, it is over with.
That's probably more accurate. Because it's like
also-
your natural response.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we're talking about what Restoration Second Stage Home does. We're so glad to have you on the show. We feel like it's a really important topic, especially to elevate locally. So a lot of people don't even I didn't know before I started doing some research that February is Sex Trafficking Awareness Month. And I feel like a lot of people are actually blind to the dangers and the realities of sex trafficking. I did a search, and it said in Canada, 93% of victims who are trafficked are Canadian, and that 90% of those people are women. Can you speak to that statistic at all in your own experience and
It's
share?
absolutely factual. And I think that is one of the biggest misconceptions about human trafficking. I know that through doing public speakings and education, I thought human trafficking was like from the movie Taken. And they think that it's this huge production of things that happen in other countries or people being brought to Canada against their will. And that is a huge problem in and of itself. And that does happening. And human trafficking is not just sexual human trafficking. There's forced labor. There's lots of avenues to it. But unfortunately, this is happening in our own backyard. And that's the scariest thing that's happening. And if we don't open everyone's eyes that this is happening in our neighborhoods, we're never going to get the leg up to fix this problem.
When you say it's happening in our own backyards, can you give an example?
Absolutely. I can assure you right now from my own experience that here in Hamilton, Ontario, every single hotel has somebody currently, right now at this moment, while we're sitting here in the morning, being trafficked from. I've personally been exploited throughout numerous hotels in the Halton area. It is happening live and direct, and it's not just people that are currently being exploited. It's also our youth that are being groomed for the purpose of sexual exploitation. So it's not just a one-faceted thing where, it's happening here. The demand's here. There's buyers in our own communities. There are neighbors. There are friends. There are family members. Unfortunately, our youth are being targeted. That's our brothers, our sisters, our kids, our neighbors as well. And then we have a huge problem because the economy of our city is also benefiting from other people being exploited, primarily with hotels, motels in the area.
Yeah.
That is so disturbing to even just hear, to like process and wrap your head around. But I think it's important so that, as we talk about these heavy topics, kind of people's eyes are opened up to, this is the world we live in. These are the realities that people are facing. You said something that I wanted to piggyback off of, because on the podcast we always ask questions about sex, about relationships, and about culture. And I actually want to dive in first about the question around relationships. You said something about grooming. How do traffickers build relationships with their victims, and why is it then so difficult for victims of traffickers to leave those relationships?
So I'm going to get into some details about there are different types of traffickers, and this is very important to know the mindset of a trafficker. To be ahead of them, you have to sometimes think like them, unfortunately. So there's definitely different types of traffickers. So we have our guerrilla pimps that we call them. These are people that use force, coercion. They're oftentimes very physical in nature. They are more of like grab you, take you around, kind of lose your things. They use force to get you forcibly confined, basically, essentially. Then we have this new aged pimp that comes into play. That's our Romeo pimp. And this, in my opinion, is the most dangerous form of pimp that we live on, because if we're talking about our youth getting groomed, these are the guys that do it. And I shouldn't say guys because they're females as well. This is not gender-based whatsoever. Males or females are traffickers. It's not just males at all. So in these situations, they approach you, and it's very much like whatever you're missing in your life, whatever your void is. So in my own personal circumstance, my traffickers did not approach me as, oh, I'm your boyfriend, I can change you around. They approached me as a family, and I was in desperate need to feel included and be part of this family. So they will hone in on weaknesses. So you'll see this very boyfriend-girlfriend relationship. They're probably going to be buying gifts. They're going to be taking them to get their hair done, their nails done. They're going to be showing them this lifestyle that's just seems to be amazing on the surface. And if we think like domestic violence, very similar. You're getting this fairy tale romantic, the best thing you could ever dream of right off the bat until it's too late. So these people are actually grooming our youth based off their insecurities. So they're getting them into these things, and they're giving them their ears. They're saying, hey, what's your family life like? Oh, what are your how's school going? And then the next week they're like, hey, I remember you're struggling on that math test. Let me help you with that math test. Oh, hey, I really want to meet your mom. Like, it is not bizarre for a trafficker to go to that victim's house. They'll meet the mother. These are charming, manipulative individuals that will go at any lengths to make the victim and everyone in their lifestyle feel completely comfortable.
Well, especially when you're talking about teenagers, right? And insecurities, that's such a big thing going through in high school, trying to figure out who am I? What do I want? And with everything in our culture, trying to figure that out, it's so easy to like pinpoint, hey, like this person like feels really insecure about this. So how can I use that to kind of get what I want out of the situation?
Absolutely. That's what trafficking definitely is.
Yeah. So also like in terms of like the culture that we live in, so like the demand for human trafficking continues to grow year after year, like you said, right in our own city. So does our current cultural understanding of sex have an influence on the demand for trafficking?
I believe so. So also, I actually work at a restaurant, and my employees are pretty much in the age of their late teens, early 20s. And I'll be shocked to tell you that I've had these open, honest conversations with them of, hey, do you guys know where you could go and purchase sex? And they're like, yeah, off of Leo's list. I can go on there and I can get a girl for $100, $120, $140. And I've had to be like, do you guys, let's take a moment of what we just said. Because culturally, they thought what they're telling me is completely appropriate. And I'm very honest of what I've gone through and like try to have those open dialogues with them to inform them that we are purchasing a human being. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now they've also responded to me with, oh, I didn't know they were victims. I thought they wanted to do this. I didn't think I was contributing to a problem. And this is the cultural problem of it all, is that we're all in denial of where the demand comes from. Yeah. And I'm also a firm believer that going out there and, you know, demonizing all these individuals who are purchasing sex isn't going to get us as far as educating them of what they are actually purchasing themselves for. And I've actually had past clients of mine that have purchased sex from me during my exploitation message me after when I've had stories come out and been like, I am so sorry for what I did. I had zero idea. And all I can ask of them at that point is, can I just tell you what to look out for? Because I was a victim and you had no idea. And that is the reality, is we can't demonize these people because it's our culture. But how do we change the culture? Because if we don't change the culture, we're not going to change anything. And the statistics that we were reading earlier, that this is a domestic problem predominantly for women. I also want to really point out to the culture that we have traffickers grooming our young men to become traffickers themselves. And it looks a very similar gateway and grooming process for someone that's going to be used for the purpose of sexual exploitation and someone that's going to be used to be the trafficker, the one that goes out there usually for these older heads, these older pimps. So they're the ones that are going to get convicted of it, and the real mastermind behind it goes unscathed.
I think that's so important. Like, just the idea of it, because it's so easy to be to look at a situation and like pick the villain, right? Like, oh, this is the bad person, or this is the bad guy. When we get the bad guy, or if we can put the blame on that one person, that will, like, you know, begin to fix the problem. When you don't realize that the problem is systemic. It's a cultural mindset. It's a cultural. There needs to be like a deconstruction of. That's a very, very favorite word of ours this year is deconstruction. Like deconstructing the way we actually think around these topics. Because it's not just about one person or this is the bad person. It's like a lot of times, like what you said, like those people who are trafficking have been trafficked themselves. And we don't even realize that, or we don't think about it that way, because I feel like a lot of times we're just blind to this whole situation.
And I also think, so I've mentioned before that I'm super into preventative measures, but I really do strongly believe that our youth are the ones that are going to change things. And I think they're miles ahead of, well, definitely my generation, to be quite honest. I think they're so much more open-minded and they're go-getters, and I see so much potential from them. So I think they're the gateway. If we can educate them and get this information out to them, they will be the ones to make the change. And they have this whole allyship, and I love the word ally, because we can't go into schools and educate just females on this, because we need everyone to be educated from the demand side down to, you know, there's going to be classmates, regardless of how they self-identify sexuality-wise, where they're going to see somebody that's falling victim, and they're going to be the ones to step in. It's not going to be our police force. It's not going to be you or I. It's actually going to be our youth standing up for each other and ending this crime. Like,
Yeah,
that's what
100%.
it's going to be.
This is why we share. This is why this is why we share. So talking about youth now, like switching up, I want to get to our question around specifically sex. What problems are our teens, our youth facing in regards to finding an answer to the question of what is sex that actually could help with this situation, this problem that we're all facing?
Well, I think that topic is such a loaded question because sex is everywhere where we go. And this goes into our culture as well, because look at social media. And I can tell you personally, from when I was in high school, we had unwritten rules. I was in high school right at the epicenter of when MySpace and Facebook were coming out. So I'm dating myself right now. But I remember these unwritten rules we had, like you could post a bikini picture, but you had to be at a pool or at the cottage, or else we are going to label you as a slut. So this whole slut shaming thing was very prevalent and out there. And now I go on social media and I'm like, oh my goodness, to me, the content that I'm seeing from teenagers, this shouldn't even be legal to be online, because I view it as a form of child pornography. And I think that's the problem with we have this so pro, like, let's embrace our bodies and let's do all, which is so powerful, but we have this really negative indentation of what sex and sex sells is still super there, which goes hand in hand with human trafficking and sexual exploitation as a whole. Sex sells, and that's what's being delivered to our youth day in and day out. And it's just having these open conversations with them, because this has historically happened. I mean, sex has always sold. That is like that is the problem that we're undergoing. But with the influx of social media and how accessible everybody is, we really need to hone in on that and have some open conversations about what sexuality looks like, and those primitive years of figuring it out, and what we can figure out, and just not holding shame around sex as well, you know?
I think that's the big thing too, is the education and conversations, not just not talking about it with our kids, because then they're going to have questions and they're going to find out about it elsewhere. So if we want to prevent it, talk about it, right?
100%. It's actually the thing that in our parent presentation that we really push with the S.H.A.R.E program. We let people know that there are usually 5 voices. Historically, 5 voices that are talking to teenagers about sex. One has been government. One has been education. One has been religious institutions. One has been families. And the 5th one, the one that's speaking the loudest, the one that is hiring the best minds out of universities and putting them to work to figure out how to sell a product, is big business. And big business, exactly what you said, like sex sells. And they are purposefully targeting youth to try to market a product. And in some ways, unfortunately, not some ways, a very real, the reality that we're facing is that the ways that they're doing that are with other people. The product is people.
And unfortunately, that's not much different than what traffickers do to their victims as well, right? So it's not that big of a difference of scope. And I loved what you said, Kassia. It's like parents, like they're going to have questions and you want them to come to you. That's what a trafficker is going to be too, is if you don't create a safe space for your child and you're not a comfortable person, and if it's not you yourself and you're uncomfortable, that's totally fine. If you can find these safe spaces for your child to go have these open dialogues, you're running less of a risk of the trafficker coming in and filling that role for you. And I know that's not what you want, but that is like, that's what they will hone in on. So it's so important to have these open dialogues, no matter how uncomfortable they might be.
I 100% agree. In our program, we really push and we encourage for our youth to find a trusted adult. And it's so like, eye-opening that is the role that these traffickers are trying to fill. Like, I'll be your trusted adult. You can talk to me about it, whatever you need. And so breaking down the walls of having these awkward conversations, and just understanding that we live in a very sexually charged culture. Like we can no longer turn a blind eye to it. We just have to accept this is the culture we live in. This is where we're at. So what are some tools that you think that we could give to parents that could help them become break down some of these like awkward feelings so that, you know, they can start to become that trusted adult, specifically when it comes to conversations around sexuality and things like that with their teenagers? Do you have any insights specifically for parents?
So my first is try to get on their level and explore what your child is into first, so that you have a general idea of it, and you're not coming in as this, where your child's going to be, oh, they don't know what they're talking about. Go through the popular social media sites, have open dialogue. Don't start with these big scary topics. Find out with your kids, like, hey, do you chat with anyone online? Like when you're playing those games, don't go into it. You better not be chatting with people online. Like just ask questions that are not sexual in nature or anything, just these fishing questions to find out where your child lands, and then try to have these open conversations just based on those things. So do your own research, attend some parent groups, learn yourself on what human trafficking looks like. And if you find a good article that resonates with you and your family culture, why don't you share that article with your child? Also, there's a lot of survivor leaders out there that have stories of when they were exploited during high school years. Ethical storytelling is a huge component of education as well. So if parents can find a story from their neighborhood of maybe somebody that was victimized by a crime, great open way to be, hey, let's read the story that happened right here in our community. It's a hands-off approach. It's not directly about the parent or the child. It's something that happened in the community. And how can you stay away from this? How can we help together protect our community and let them know that human trafficking is not welcome here?
Yeah.
Say it again for the people in the back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Human traffic is not welcome here. Yeah, I think that's so important. Like as a tool for parents to know that, and educators, people who are working with youth, letting them know that in order to get into this conversation, that you can start small. That you don't have to be like, okay, we're gonna have the sex talk. Like, just be like, exactly what you said. Hey, tell me more about this. Like, what is this thing? Do you talk to people? That's kind of cool. What's that like? And getting in through that way to slowly build that rapport so that you can have harder, and deeper conversations down the line. It's the same way as getting to know somebody like who's a friend, right? You don't just jump in with like, here's my life story and here's all my trauma.
Really?
Yes.
Oh.
We'll have a longer conversation, Kassia.
I'm just joking. No, you're very right, Carl.
Yeah, it's like I am an anxious attachment,
Enneagram types?
Enneagram type 8, which I am also an Enneagram type 8. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I know. This is why we're friends.
Fellows.
I know, it's great. But, just those kind of like small icebreaker conversations. And a lot of this is very daunting. And I know that like we're smiling and joking, having a good time while also talking about a very serious topic. That's kind of, I feel, a very healthy thing too, to know that you can have very serious, deep conversations, and they don't have to be so terrifying. They don't have to be so scary. I love the work that you're doing. Can you tell us a little bit more about Restoration House specifically?
Yeah. So actually, I will rewind from the beginning, but Restorations actually came in by just a group of individuals that absolutely saw the need for second stage housing for victims of human trafficking. And this group of amazing individuals in 2013, their first meeting was actually just on the floor of someone's living room. And they had this idea and they were like, we are going to bring this to fruition. And then through the years, it was a long process. We finally opened our first transitional home in 2022, Nancy's House. And it was a very exciting long road to this, but also in 2019, through this entire time, through 2013, our executive director actually worked for or volunteered for an organization that ran out of Hamilton, Walk With Me Canada, which is no longer, but they were an emergency safe home for victims of human trafficking. And our ED's constant problem was finding these victims long-term housing solutions. Yeah. So like that whole message behind it. And I use the word reintegration into society, and I don't feel like that's the best word, but I don't have a different word, but I can speak for myself personally. You're coming from the sex trade back into this scary world that you don't quite feel like you belong to, and you need to heal, first of all. So it's not just about housing, it's about holistic care. And that's what we really focus on at Restorations. And that's the beautiful part of also having our peer support program. And when we're talking about having these open, honest conversations, we actually have a drop-in group as part of our peer support program. And oftentimes when I go out and tell people about this drop-in program that we have, people are think we're all sitting in a circle and going off on our trauma. And we don't. We hardly ever speak about our trauma. It's a group where it's an unwritten rule. We've all been through some type of trauma that looks totally different, but we have some similarities, and we come together to create this community and this empowerment of hope and resilience. And that's also what Restoration Second Stage Home and Nancy's house looks like as well. It's been such an amazing experience getting in, and I can't thank the members of the community enough, because that happened with the support of a community, which just goes to show that the community supports rehabilitation to victims of human trafficking. But I'm also led to believe they also believe that human trafficking is a huge crime that should not be in our neighborhoods, which brings me so much hope and joy. Nancy's house was a project of love, and we are so forever grateful for all our donors and all our community partners that made this long work. And we have our mini staff now when we have residents, and it's just so nice to see this run full circle, and I'm so blessed to have been able to come on board.
That's amazing. That's so great. We're going to continue this conversation in our Real Talk segment. And I'm super excited for it. I think that this is something that we need to talk about more. I know that we're kind of coming to the close of this podcast, so I just want to ask you, if someone is listening and they want to learn more, they want to be like, okay, how do I get involved? How do I support Restoration's House? What are some things that they can do? How can they get in contact with you to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can visit restorationscanada.org. We accept donations, monthly sponsors, and we also have an Amazon wish list that really helps tremendously at our residential home as well. So you can check out. You can also learn more information on human trafficking, and we have links to resources across Canada to broaden that spectrum as well.
That's amazing. So, Kassia, if someone is in a crisis right now, what are some places that they can go to find some help?
Yeah, so you can also check out the Atwell Center website, give us a call and just talk to someone who can kind of help guide you from there. And there's tons of great resources online, different helplines, numbers you can call. So we're going to put a screen up for that on YouTube, and also you can check out our podcast bio link and find some links there as well.
Awesome. Also, all of the links that Michelle has given, they will be linked in our description. So if you want to learn more about restorations, I really encourage you guys to follow those links. It's an amazing organization. So click on those links, go check them out, learn about this important topic. If you want to learn about more topics that the S.H.A.R.E program has talked about on our podcast, go listen to our last episode. We talked about body image. It was fantastic. So don't forget to like, subscribe, share, all of those wonderful things. Hit the bell. Notifications are great. And do tune in to us for our next podcast, our Real Talk episode, where we're going to continue to talk about this really important topic with Michelle. So that is our show for today. We want to thank you guys for coming and remind you again,
Don't forget to share.